It's no secret that running is on the rise, both in Canada and globally. At the heart of the surge in popularity has been the booming world of run clubs, which have struck a chord with many as an avenue to both better physical health through a reliable fitness routine, as well as stronger social connection through a shared cultural experience. Yet despite the intentions of run clubs to serve as a space of inclusivity, the initial step of attending is an intimidating one for many would-be participants. This challenge can be made especially acute for runners who are part of a culturally diverse group of visible minorities, who often see people who look like and share their cultural backgrounds with them underrepresented in the running world. Meeting this challenge head-on is a rapidly growing subset of the run club world. Communities springing up across the country aimed at creating spaces where the desire for active community collides with shared culture and history. These groups are shining a light on a blind spot of the running establishment, making spaces where participants can find not only a shared passion for movement, but also cultural, linguistic, and ethnic connection. In doing so, a whole new wave of runners are joining the run club scene, not only growing the sport as a whole, but increasing diversity and representation within running at the same time. I'm your host, John Gay, and joining me today on the Shakeout Podcast are Merzeau of Black Runners of the GTA, Ekua Cudjoe of Soleful Runs, Alex and Vince Hyunh of Asian Toronto Run Club, and Bautista of Filipinos in the Six Run Club. Today on the podcast, we'll hear from these leaders at the forefront of the cultural run club movement, who not only recognize the need to create better spaces for runners from their communities, but have expanded the running community as a whole in the process. All of you, welcome to the Shakeout Podcast. Thanks so much for taking the time to join us today.
Hi there.
Glad to be here.
Thanks for having us.
I'm really excited to dive into this conversation. This is an exciting time of year for many in the run club space. People are settling back into fall routines. Many people are looking to get back on the fitness and wellness wagon after a summer of festivities. And in my opinion, and I'm sure many of you will agree, there's no better place to start than with a running club. And each of you have made it part of your mission to make that space more and more inclusive. And so to start us off, I just want to hear a little bit about why there's such an importance for run clubs like the ones that you operate and what type of service they offer to the broader running community. Mel, maybe we'll start with you.
Well, I started Black Runners of the GTA during the pandemic. It's mostly a virtual run community in a space like that. The reason why I started it was just the importance of representation. I know Ekua was already doing social runs. So it just seemed like just getting that representation, including more people to see representation, positive representation of running, and to invite more people to run if they're inspired by others. And at that time, we were in the pandemic, so we were running by ourselves and I was trying to motivate people to go for a run or go for a walk or just get started in running. And eventually, when races come back, be more ingrained in the community.
I love that you talk about that isolation piece. I think the pandemic was when many of our listeners found running for the first time, and what started for many as a solitary endeavor was something that there was a real appetite to grow into a community experience. Now, many of you have expressed that in seeking out those community experiences, there weren't necessarily great options available at the time. And you already mentioned, Melanie, the work that Ekua was doing with Soleful Run. So Ekua, maybe I'll turn it over to you. What motivated you to start an in-person run club? Because it was also kind of coming out of the pandemic, was it not?
Right before, it was like three weeks before we went to full lockdown. But when I started off Soleful Runs, I was actually out in the community. I was going to a lot of different run clubs, different gyms, different spaces. My background in sport is track and field. And after coming from that community, once you graduate from a university or varsity space, there isn't always that connection of that community because you've graduated. And some folks don't continue on the sport and are looking for that new space. So I'm exploring different avenues to, of course, get into, find that new community and space. But what I noticed quite often is that when I go to a new space, whether it was a gym or it was a run club, is that some people already have their community established. So once you come in as a new person, there isn't always that practice of like acknowledging that someone's coming that's new, who wants to participate, but also there might be an expectation of performance. So whether it is a run club, and for myself, I go to a place, I'm like, oh my goodness, you must be fast because I look athletic. And I'm like, no, I was a thrower. So I was doing 20-meter, 30-meter sprints. Like, I'm not as fast as we may assume that I was. So I noticed that when I was going to different places, at times there's either an expectation for you to perform in a certain way, or there was already that inner circle. And so it was a little bit of a work of like trying, the new person, the newcomer had to do a little bit extra work to almost get fit in. So like you might have to go around greeting and introduce yourself to 20 people versus those 20 people acknowledging that you came to that space. And that's kind of how Soleful Run started off, where I acknowledge that gap. And I know for myself, if I want to go and experience, I'm going to go. But there's other people where if they go places and they don't feel welcomed off the bat, that might be the end of their running journey or their fitness journey because they feel like they may not belong. So for Soleful Run, they kind of took away that competitive aspect of having a certain distance or speed that you had to run, but also the element of community first. And that's where it kind of comes with the Soulful, where there's so many layers of like the soul of your play, the soul of an individual, but like bringing folks together and really creating that space I mentioned. First off the top is like getting to know everyone's name and their pronouns and that welcoming aspect, but also a space for you to talk and connect with people. And the movement is what comes next.
I love that you mentioned that it's stripping away some of those implicit barriers that I think many run clubs probably aren't even realizing exist when they're putting together a group run. There's a implication that you have to be a certain level of competitiveness to even show up, and that keeps people. You mentioned talking about athletes who would be otherwise interested, but they never even start their running journey because they feel like the barrier to entry is too high. Alex and Vince, with Asian Toronto Run Club, did you have a similar experience? Did you feel like there was a barrier for people to even begin their running journey, and that was what was keeping them from coming out and running in the first place?
It started early 2024. And, our mission, of course, was to bring Asians together in a space, especially in Toronto, where we live in one of the largest cities. And that was one of the missing space, I felt, right? A missing representation in that community. And, at the core front, we definitely wanted to bring fitness, right? We wanted to bring fitness into the community for Asian people. And, but it wasn't more so in terms of like bringing them in. It's more so just having that community, having that space for everybody. And just running itself created that for everybody. And so that was, I think that was very cool to see. But yeah, back to your question. I think, no, for sure. I think people are definitely more skeptical when they hear the word Asian itself. They might feel excluded. But everybody is actually welcome. This is not a exclusive community. We are open armed and welcome everybody that comes into the club. So yeah, I think it's pretty cool.
Just to add on to his, I think when he started the idea too, and having previously, for myself, to started like a culture club in university, I think it was a terrific idea, and I think, starting this whole wine club was definitely just creating a home and where people could show up and feel seen, celebrated and understood that from the very get-go.
I like that you mentioned seen, celebrated, and understood. And that's been a common theme through all of your endeavors, is creating a space where people really feel at home and feel like there is some commonality. I guess maybe a better place to start was that something that really felt like it was missing in other run club spaces? And was that the impetus for that? Maybe Tap, I'll throw it over to you. You're obviously a brand new club with Filipinos in the Six. You guys started less than a month ago. Why now? And what was kind of the driving force behind creating a space specifically for the Toronto Filipino community?
Well, the credit actually goes to my friend Carlos, who is the lead and head of Filipinos in the Six. A few months ago, he had just posted up within the community if there was a want for a run club, and there was a resounding yes. There was a call for it. So I was just working out, and my phone went off, and I was called to be asked if I was strong enough of a runner to lead the Filipinos in the Six. And I just wanted an opportunity to have a positive impact on the community, and said yes, like almost immediately. Funny enough, I started my running journey with Asian Toronto Run Club at the beginning of the year, and
Cool.
not that there wasn't an inclusive space for Filipinos, but it was funny that I wasn't really meeting too many of them. I would meet them every so often, but there wasn't this big space for it. So I just felt that like to be included on this endeavor to create one was something that was very fun, and the space we've created is like Vincent said, inclusive of everybody. I hope that not having Filipino genes doesn't stop anybody from coming to our clubs.
I like the iterative process of you attended a run club and were inspired by that run club to create a run club that you felt could serve an even more specific community, one that you obviously have your own personal ties to. And there's been a common theme of that being something that wasn't easily accessible in other areas of the lives of many participants of these run clubs. Mel, I want to get back to you because Black Runners of the GTA is more than just a run club. It really is an online community that's fostering a sense of celebration for the Black community in Toronto. Running is one of the vessels of that. But you've talked before about how it's much more than that, and it's really about creating a space where Black people in Toronto can come together and have that cultural touchstone and that shared sense of community. Was that something that felt like it was, if not missing, underdeveloped prior to starting Black Runners of the GTA?
My background is in diversity and inclusion. So technically, when I was looking at the run community as a whole, I kind of looked at it as like a corporation in
Yeah.
the sense that Black Runners of the GTA is like an ERG, employee resource group. So kind of thing is it fosters community within the Black community, and I opened it up to BIPOC community. So I really wanted an understanding that when people saw a story that it lives on. And it will always be inspiring to whoever comes onto the page, whether it's something that is educational or something that is communal or something that you can say, hey, I see someone who looks like me and continue to run. And that's what the stories that would live on. So even if you saw someone at the start of a line and you don't run with them in your run group, but you know that you saw their story, or you follow a page, let's say Soleful Runs, or you follow Ultra Black or Full Run Club, you would notice that person is like community because you've seen them before. You know their story. You know their run club. You know the space, and it's more collective. Just your run club. It's much more than that. So that was the precipice. Black Runners of the GTA was like building it like an ERG.
And how important do you think it was for people to see others that looked like them in order to have the motivation to get out and run? In any of your experience in Ekua, maybe I'll throw it to you next. Had your experience, you had obviously been an athlete, a varsity athlete at the University of Toronto, but when you began your running journey, was the impetus behind starting Soulful Runs because you weren't seeing people that looked like you had the same background as you out running?
There are multiple layers. Yes, the representation is a part of it. And even though I was throwing in university, running has always been a part of my life. So even back in like elementary, like cross country and different things, but in my off season, I always loved running. And I grew up in Weston, and there aren't many people who go out running in that community. And so that was a time where I actually would go for a run. I'd have people in their car like honking, like, yes, keep going. And it was almost something people didn't see in that area, in that neighborhood. So just the fact that like I realized as I ran that I inspired other people in that small way. But also seeing across our city, I have to say a big kudos to all the run clubs that already exist, but seeing that people were able to move together, create community, have that joy, and knowing that's possible from running is the reason why I create Soulful Runs, is because I realized that not everyone felt that they could enter the sport in that way or that they could experience it. But there are so many amazing benefits that come from being in that community space, running, and just connecting while moving as well. So that was really the reason why I leaned into it, is because when we think about recreational running, we don't see how many Black bodies doing that. when we hear about the news, some of our own personal experiences of going for runs and at times kind of being police of why are you running, where are you running, and all those other barriers, that was a really big thing. So with Soulful Runs, I want to really normalize the fact that Black bodies can move in this way, can enjoy the sport in this way without having to have any other reason except for the fact that they love doing the sport and they love connecting with people.
And I can only imagine that increasing that visibility has a cascading effect where the more people see others that look like them, come from the same places, same neighborhoods as them, out running, the more it brings down those barriers to get out and run themselves. Tep, has that been the experience in these early days of Filipinos in the Six Run Club? Obviously, you guys are brand new, but have there been any stories that have jumped out to you from new members who have maybe come out that wouldn't otherwise have seen themselves out in a group running, or maybe not running at all, but because of this new space, they feel empowered to do so?
Yeah, absolutely. I've had a lot of comments actually, even on our very first run, just thank yous going around, saying like, thanks for starting this because we haven't seen very many Filipinos at other run clubs, which was my experience as well. Not that it's hard to find Filipinos in any space. We're pretty much all over the place, but like to have an easier barrier to break into the running space, I think was what was needed for some people, because running is really super great for your overall health and wellness, and like we prioritize like just our physical fitness as well as our mental health. For Filipinos, that's a big thing, and yeah, a lot of comments have been going around just in thanks that there is something that's available now for people to go to that just has our culture attached to it.
Throwing this question out to everyone, is there something specific about the medium of running that makes it valuable as a platform for creating this richer, deeper sense of community?
I could hop in.
It's a good question.
I think that with the sport itself, that it's quite accessible and it's pretty democratic. It's pretty level playing field. Not as many things of entry. Like you can buy the fancy gears, you can have the running vest, you can have the watches and all things, but truly you just need a pair of shoes and go out the door. And so I think because the actual entry to walking and running is very democratic, that it's an awesome way for people to actually start whatever level they choose to participate, whether they want to work their way up to do road racing and go to the competitive level or just continuing actively. So I think the fact that we don't have to consider the cost, which is also a mindset of like, we can come together and not have to pay for it, is actually very rare in our city right now. Everything always has a cost to participate. So to know that there's no financial barriers that are being associated in that capacity is a really awesome way of like just getting started. You can move, you can do it on your own, but seeing if like there's a lot of ways you can test it, then also come into a larger community element that now it's like the other barriers I may consider, like, you know, there might be that fear of like, if you go on your own, when I show up, will I be accepted? Well, can I do it? Can I keep up? And all those things, you can have this community supporting you to get over maybe some of those fears or some of those hesitancies. So I think because it is a sport that is super democratic, has a very level playing field of entry, that it allows us to really add on all of these benefits on top.
Yeah, just removing those barriers that many other sports already have in place really does seem to make running the easiest gateway into a participatory social sporting experience. Alex and Vince, you started your club coming up on 2 years ago. It'll be started 2024 that you started. And on that topic of creating a place with low barriers to entry, I want to maybe pivot now towards people who are considering starting a club of their own. What was your experience like in actually getting your club up and off of the ground? And what would your advice be to those who are listening to this and thinking, hey, I live in a place where there isn't representation for people that look like me or people with my shared cultural background. Maybe it's up to me to start that club in my city or my neighborhood. What was your experience like, and what would some of your advice be to those who are feeling the tug that maybe starting a run club is for them?
Yeah, I think our impact definitely operates on two levels. I would say first, within running, I think when we've started off is definitely the culture, but also normalizing diversity, right? I think every photo that we post and every event that we hold, there's also like a change in visual representation in terms of the running community and showing that everyone is welcome within the club. And I think also beyond that, we're building a blueprint in terms of community building, demonstrating that, there's, you know, it's like powerful and joyful and, really like a space where we can just bring everyone together where there's new runners and then just connecting with people in general. I think understanding how we can really build that network and confidence within the community. Um, and our members are taking that energy into, industries and um, so I think just growing wonders and empowering people to really get involved was somewhat the first stepping stone in really growing the community. But also, I think it's also in terms of through words of mouth and uh, you know friendships, and so I think overall those are the ways that we've definitely have set and yeah build the foundation of where we are today.
And what was some of the initial response or reaction to the start of Asian Toronto Run Club? What was it met with open arms? Was there a lot of initial interest, or you had to build this gradually over time?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. Originally when we first started off, we started off with 10 runners, and then gradually within a month, it certainly exploded to over 100 members that would come out
Wow.
on a weekly basis. And, it was quite overwhelming at first, obviously, because, um, we did had a sense of um, like it was more so like a challenge in terms of nuisance where people would ask, is it Asian focused club? And our approach was mainly communication focused on like celebration and not so exclusion. We're trying to build a bridge rather than, a wall and like cultural sharing, right? And so I think, it really exploded right after like this whole new dating trend that started as well, and definitely it shifted from there. Um,
Great place to meet someone.
yeah, certainly, and that's really how it came apart, came together.
I like that you mentioned building a bridge and not a wall, and I think that that touches on something that I had hoped we could talk a little bit about, which is that these clubs, and you've already shared this so powerfully, they're not existing to create an exclusionary space, but rather to create a bigger running community as a whole. Melanie, I think that this is really beautifully kind of summed up in the work that the Scarborough 5K has been doing. You obviously wear multiple hats in addition to running Black Runners of the GTA and your work in diversity, equity, and inclusion. You're also a race director. And seeing the Scarborough 5K create a competitive event, a running event that brings people together for one day every year, was something that I think is really unique and really shows how you've bridged that gap and created a space for people to not only get into running, but to grow deeper into running where they're finding themselves on a starting line, many for the first time in their lives. Could you talk a little bit more about how the Scarborough 5K is building that running community and maybe a little bit about the Couch to 5K program, which is really geared at encouraging people who have never run a road race before to get out there, to get moving with a goal and a date in mind?
So before there was Scarborough Runs, which is an awesome run crew in Scarborough, that's doing very well. They run out of Thompson Park on Thursday. But before there was Scarborough Runs, there was the idea of the Scarborough 5K. And then the idea was to have a race that's for people who want to get into running, but were too intimidated to like even start or had a goal in mind. So the idea was to have Scarborough 5K in the community so people can see themselves running and be like, hey, what is that? I want to be a part of it. But making it so inclusive that it's part of the culture of Scarborough. So like beef patties, samosas, just really making it really beginner friendly. We invite the run crews, the cheer on runners as they compete. or try to test and challenge themselves with the Scarborough 5K. So the idea was really just building, just for new runners, just to experience the joy of running and just have like awesome food and a DJ that plays soca music at the end, like just like making it a very party atmosphere. Um, but I worked with Scarborough 5 or Scarborough Runs this year to do the Couch the 5K, because usually Black Runners of the GTA does it virtually, but to get it there, and they met with the actual beginning to Couch the 5K people 3 times a week, and I came out to some of the runs, and then they also had a virtual option which was managed by Black Runners of the GTA, just to really get people motivated and knowing that they had a goal in mind, which was signing up for the Scarborough 5K.
Just so cool to see that event continue to grow and bring people into the sport that otherwise wouldn't have necessarily found a place in the sport. That brings me to maybe a broader question that I'll throw out to the group is, what can existing run clubs be doing to make their spaces more inclusive and more welcoming to people that have historically been underrepresented in the running world, or specifically in the run club scene?
I would hopefully like to see more fun events in the city that are inter-club related. Maybe things that we could do together collaboratively.
Yeah, bringing together multiple voices, multiple perspectives. Is that something that feels like it's not as big as it could be right now in the city of Toronto?
Yeah, I feel like there are a bunch of events that are already in place, but not very many. There could be a lot more.
Now, this reminds me, Ekua, we had talked a little bit before this about some of the non-run club, but certainly running-related events that Soleful Runs has been a part of, and how they're really working to not just grow the sport, but also to grow the sense of Black Canadian identity in the city of Toronto. Do you want to talk a little bit about some of those initiatives and how Soleful Runs really served as a launch pad into these broader community outreach programs?
Absolutely. So with Soleful, as I mentioned, we started right before the pandemic. And so during that time, as people were running on their own, also wanted to really encourage folks to use running as a space, whether it's to reflect or to stay active and stay connected. And it was actually a big call to action simply to normalize Black running. As well during that time with the passing of Ahmaud Arbery and honoring his life as well. That hit me pretty hard because I was the same age as him as he passed. And I really just thought about how my experience in running and how that's come about. So that was just one element of like really reflecting about, as I mentioned, how Black bodies are moving through recreational spaces and feeling safe and confident to do so. But beyond that, throughout the summertime, it's really looking at, of course, advocating to normalize the concept of Black running and Black runner. And once we hit the summer, as you know, a big staple in the community, not just the Black community, but also in the Caribbean community and also other global communities, is Emancipation Day, but also Caravana. The whole city turns up whenever that comes around. And of course, once it was canceled that summer, people were like, oh, again, Caravana's gone. We're in lockdown. And that's when the whole awareness around Emancipation Day came about, where I realized that a lot of people did not know what Emancipation Day was or is. And for myself, I knew about it because my parents are educators. They used to always bring me to different events. So I knew about it as a child. And every year I always tell a few friends like, oh, the civic holiday is actually for Emancipation Day. So that year I decided to actually lead a campaign initiative where folks were running. So not only normalize Black running, but to learn about Black Canadian history. So I created a petition, put a whole bunch of links in it to connect back to different Black Canadian archives and websites so people can learn, but also a call to action to our government to acknowledge the day. It was not acknowledged at the federal level. Different cities like Toronto had already acknowledged it in 2019, and different spaces had their own thing. And so that was a way of, as I mentioned, it wasn't just the Black community at that moment, it was the entire country of really rallying as like, how are we acknowledging our history? But also it was a sense of activism, of the fact that you were going out to run, seeing so much Black joy during a time, a lot of hurt and a lot of grief, but then also that call to action. How do we really unite of acknowledging our history and then building a future that we want to see together where people can feel like they're safe, they belong, and can really prosper. So that has been one element with Emancipation Day. Amazing from that petition, it did evolve into a federal petition. And then the following year, the bill passed where Emancipation Day is acknowledged federally, not as a full holiday, but it is recognized at that level. And so from every year since then, that has been a moment we've always come back to Emancipation Day and continue to bring that awareness. It's been so beautiful to see since 2020, not just from our running spaces, but also other communities leaning into that moment, because that was the intent. It was kind of to start a conversation to look at how do we actually learn more about the history of our country, but also for people to feel like to learn about their history and then feel empowered so then they can continue to really build and feel confident in whichever space they lean into. So it's been a really great, as mentioned, every year of celebrating Emancipation Day, but also just passing on that knowledge so that people feel super confident about their history, but also confident to build the future that they want to see.
Empowering and instilling confidence that was quite understandably shaken in the wake of Ahmaud Arbery's passing, of course, murdered while out for a jog in Atlanta in 2020. And I think that was a wake-up call for many people, that a sport that many people, myself included, have been able to take for granted their whole lives, as it never meant anything to me to be able to slip on my shoes and go out for a run and have to worry about feeling safe or not. And that's something that I think is a conversation that's continuing to happen. The Black Lives Matter movement that launched at that same time, as you mentioned, Ekua, was a springpad to that, and so encouraging to just see groups rising up. And I'm going to touch back to what you said earlier, making visible spaces for minority groups to be represented in the city.
Sorry, I want to add to what you're saying too, because I know the question you had earlier about what other run groups can do to connect. And I think as we're looking at that, that is a huge space where all run clubs could look at it, of like, there's some barriers that you may not think about yourself when you're entering to a space. And this doesn't matter what culture you have, what gender orientation. There's a lot of things that your own personal experience that someone else might have other things to consider. So whether that might be financial, maybe, considering of, for example, we call out explicitly that we welcome folks of the LGBTQ community, because sometimes implicit is not enough for someone to show up and feel safe. So those elements of like explicitly saying that you are creating a space that's safe for someone, but also when someone shows up, of making sure that you actually even just acknowledge them and welcome in, that is a huge barrier to remove for folks. So I think that's something, as I mentioned, it's not really a criteria when it comes to identity, but when it just comes to creating a community of belonging that every run club can do. And it's not considering that folks aren't doing it to be malicious. It's just things that not everyone is aware of. But as leaders, we all have a responsibility to continue to learn and think about how, when we're putting something out there, of like, what's the responsibility to uphold that so that people do feel safe, and always adjusting and pivoting to continue to learn to accommodate as well.
Shining light on the blind spots that, as you mentioned quite rightly, not necessarily malicious, but simply things that are going undone that are relatively easy fixes. Being explicit where you think that being implicit could be good enough, but choosing to actually put that message out there to not just hope that your community is welcoming, but to really take the action towards making it a welcoming community. I want to go back to you, Tep. How have you created a welcoming space in these early stages? I think hopefully people listening to this are being encouraged by the idea of starting a run club of their own. What are some of the things that you've found are working to make sure that the Filipinos in the 6 Run Club has been an encouraging space from the get-go to get people out for the first time when the club is so new?
Really just posting about it. There hasn't been any pushback from the community or anything. A community being like the running community.
Right.
In terms of starting the run club, I've actually gotten people pushing us to do like more. And with ATRC, even in general, like a few of their runners have come up to our run clubs, and I still go out to their run clubs every single week. So there's still that like sense of community wherever I go. And within Filipinos in the 6, it's everybody that comes out has just been saying that being a part of the other run clubs makes it easier. We start our runs over by Love Park, which is right across from a cafe called Ivy Coffee. The owner of Ivy Coffee, his girlfriend, soon to be, I think his fiance now, is Filipina, and a lot of his drinks include a lot of the flavors that we have in our desserts, and even just having those little incentives in beverages at the end of your runs help with having people come out. at our halfway point, we have a spot where we can look back and see the view of the city skyline with the CN Tower there. And having spots like that even pull people out, because within the Filipino community, a lot of people love doing photography. A lot of people love shooting videos and stuff, and providing a space and providing a route even helps people come out for these runs.
Creating that inclusive space. I find it very interesting that food is playing a role in multiple instances. We heard Melanie talk about serving patties after the Scarborough 5K, and I think the key to many runners' hearts is through their stomachs, and I love that we're seeing that theme arise in multiple spaces, sharing not just the cultures but the flavors of all of these very diverse groups.
Yeah,
now I want to wrap up.
Calories lost.
Exactly, yeah. And then a little bit more to top you off for the rest of the day too. At least that's always been my goal with a run. Now, I want to finish us off by looking ahead at ways that people can get involved, not just with the community clubs that are out there, but in other ways where they can help create a more welcoming and inclusive running community as a whole. Melanie, the Toronto Waterfront Marathon is coming up in just over a month's time. Now, you're involved with some pretty cool initiatives surrounding that event. Do you want to speak to that, about some of the work that TCS Toronto Waterfront is doing?
Yes, they're really ramped up their inclusive efforts since the past 3 years. Really getting their hands into all aspects and just trying to get as many stories heard. One of the panels that I'll be moderating this year is about inclusion in the running community, and it'll be different areas or different run crews that will be speaking, as well as race directors. So the Pride Run, the Caravana Run, as well as the Arab Run crew, as well as a Muslim women run crew that happens in Mississauga Fit. So I'm excited to talk to all of them, hear their perspective, and have a conversation about how it's inclusion that we're focusing on, and it shouldn't be like deemed as something that's being exclusionary, because we're just bringing more runners into a joyous celebration, which is the TCS marathon, the half marathon, and the 5K.
A joyous celebration. That's been a common thread. I think each of you have used those words explicitly in our conversation here today. What is your advice to the prospective run clubber to get involved in these joyous celebrations? What have been some of the maybe main fears of prospective members that have come to your clubs or your community events and have seen the positive side after coming out and taking that first step? What kind of encouragement could you give to people looking to explore these type of run clubs? Alex and Vince, with your club, what is some of the advice you'd offer?
Well, first and foremost, I think finding pride in the culture that we share, right? I think that is, something that we all appreciate. And so whenever there is somebody new that comes out to a club, that is something they would experience off the bat. And most of what social events that happen, we would hear that a lot, that, they find it, such an incredible time when they come out with us, and that having just that community and that identity that we share, gives that little, pushy, like, there's a good feeling to them. And, honestly, just, having that sense of joy and happiness whenever they come out, it's something that we always look forward to. But that's honestly just a simple, like, piece of advice is finding that pride in that in our culture.
Fantastic. And for those who are already attending run clubs, for our listeners, you've heard it here. Don't be afraid to say hi and introduce yourself to a new member coming out to your run club. As we've talked about, as Ekua pointed out, it's making those intentional decisions to create a welcoming space that makes all the difference in growing the sport that we all love. And I think we can all agree that the more people who fall in love with running the way that we have, the better it is for all of our run clubs and for the sport as a whole. All of you, thank you so much for taking the time today to share your perspectives and your experience. I know it's been an encouragement to me, and I know to many of our listeners as well. And we wish you all the best as you ramp up for what I hope will be a very busy and fun-filled fall Run Club season. Thank you so much for your time.
Awesome.
Thank you, John.
you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having us.
Another huge thank you to our guests on today's episode, Melanie, Ekua, Tep, Vince, and Alex. Make sure to check out our show notes to find all the information you need to become a part of the Run Club movement through their exciting runs, races, and community events. And don't forget to give them a follow at the social media accounts linked below. You can follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and X at Shakeout Podcast. Make sure to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts so you don't miss any of the exciting episodes coming up in the weeks ahead. I'm your host, John Gay, saying thanks for tuning in. We'll see you again soon for your next Shakeout.